Our senses send information about the outside world to the brain's working memory. The working memory can store very little information. Typically, a person can keep only 5 to 7 pieces of information in the working memory at one time. If more information is added, the working memory will be overloaded and information will be lost. In addition, the working memory can only store information for about 10 or 15 seconds before it's forgotten. Information in the working memory can be sent to the long-term memory for storage to be recalled later. Information that's not stored in the long-term memory is lost. Aerial work platforms provide a temporary workspace as an alternative to ladders or scaffolding. They can be used to perform inspection, maintenance, or repairs. The main parts of an aerial work platform are the chassis or base, the supporting boom, and the platform or basket itself. The chassis is a self-propelled base that provides support and stabilization to the whole piece of equipment. The boom is the arm or support that maneuvers the platform into place. The actual platform can be a large railed platform or an enclosed insulated basket. In either case, it should support the worker and any necessary equipment. This module describes different types of aerial work platforms and how to operate them safely. In energized equipment, electric current travels in a very controlled, precise path. There are conditions that can cause electricity to divert from its normal path and travel through the air. This release of energy instantly superheats the air and any nearby components, causing an explosion. This chain of events is known as an arc flash. Lightning is an example of a naturally occurring arc flash. Similar to lightning, arc flashes in the workplace occur suddenly and violently, with no warning. Asbestos is a naturally occurring substance which has been used extensively in the building industry. It has been determined that improper exposure to asbestos can cause a number of different diseases which can take as long as 20 years or more to develop. This module describes what asbestos is and the hazards it presents. The best method for eliminating or reducing the risk of back injuries is the use of engineering controls. Examples of engineering controls include the use of lifting aids or designing workstations to reduce the amount of strain on the body. For example, if there is a heavy load on the floor that needs to be moved, try splitting it up to reduce its size or weight, or use a cart or dolly to move it to the desired location. If a load is located at a higher level or needs to be moved to a location that is out of reach, use a mechanical lift, conveyor, or mobile equipment if possible. Designing workstations to reduce the amount of strain on the body can also help prevent back injuries. For example, if your job requires you to sit for long periods of time, select chairs or desks designed to reduce back strain or increase lumbar support. If your job requires standing for long periods of time, use footrests or fatigue-reducing floor mats. Blood-borne pathogens are microorganisms carried by the blood that cause disease in people. These viruses or bacteria can cause illness, injury to the body, and even death. Because of the danger posed by bloodborne pathogens, the government regulatory agency known as OSHA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, has issued safety rules known as the Bloodborne Pathogen Standard to help increase awareness and prevent the spread of disease. The next sections will cover a few types of bloodborne pathogens. Pressure is the force exerted by a gas against the inner surface of the container or vessel in which it is held. Pressure is usually expressed as a force per unit area, or pounds per square inch, or PSI. There are two ways of expressing a given pressure: gauge pressure and absolute pressure. These two methods differ in how they account for atmospheric pressure. Although it may seem that there is no pressure in the air that surrounds us, in scientific terms, there actually is. As a result of being beneath the 18-mile thick layer of air which surrounds the Earth, the atmospheric pressure at sea level is 14.7 psi greater than the absolute zero pressure of deep space. In most situations, we really only care how much pressure exists in excess of atmospheric pressure. This is referred to as gauge pressure. Gauge pressure uses atmospheric pressure as its zero point. When a typical cylinder is filled to its design pressure of 2400 psi, it will contain almost 300 cubic feet of atmospheric pressure gas, or about 160 times the internal volume of the cylinder. This compression of gas represents a tremendous amount of stored energy. If the outlet valve is broken off, the sudden release of compressed gas can turn the cylinder into a missile with energy to shoot through a cinder block wall. In one reported incident, a damaged cylinder penetrated 2 sheet metal walls before becoming airborne and exiting through the roof. The tank reached an altitude of 140 feet before falling back through the building's roof a second time. When a steel cylinder becomes a projectile, it can move with great force, at high speeds, and in unpredictable directions, with the potential to cause serious or fatal injuries. Exposure to harmful substances or environments is a leading cause of illness and death in the industrial workplace. Working in a confined space can represent a triple threat of hazards to employees. First, workers run the risk of exposure to a range of hazardous atmospheres when entering a confined space. Second, the space can present physical dangers due to cramped working space, proximity to moving equipment, poor walking surfaces, and the possibility of engulfment. Finally, the nature of confined spaces makes rescue of someone needing assistance within the space much more difficult. To be sure that work within a confined space is performed safely, employers must develop strategies that help workers recognize and avoid these potentially dangerous conditions. Effective confined space entry strategies should begin with the education and training of all entrants, attendants, and support personnel.
Conflict is often thought of as a bad thing. However, a conflict can actually be an opportunity for employees to come together, solve work or personal problems, and then become a better, more unified team. A conflict can become a problem when it is ignored or goes unresolved. An unresolved conflict can lead to long-term tension and unhappiness among employees. For this reason, it is important to address workplace conflicts and try to resolve them as soon as they arise.
When an emergency stop has been activated, the conveyor should stop immediately. Once the conveyor is stopped, then the emergency situation can be dealt with. If workers are injured, follow your company's emergency procedures for first aid, or summon qualified medical care as quickly as possible. Immediately following any emergency, the conveyor should be locked out and tagged out. The conveyor should then be inspected to identify the cause of the stoppage and be corrected before it is restarted. Before the conveyor is restarted, the e-stop may need to be reset to its normal operating position. Metal mesh slings are made up of small, connected metal rings or other shapes. This results in a mesh sheet that is flexible and has a large surface area. Metal mesh slings are widely used in metalworking and other industries where loads are abrasive, hot, or sharp. The wide surface area of the mesh prevents single-point stresses that would occur on wire ropes or chains. Also, metal mesh grips the load firmly without stretching and helps maintain a balanced load. To prevent the sling or load from being damaged, sometimes metal mesh slings are coated with rubber or plastic. When following another vehicle, always follow the 2-second rule. This means you should leave at least 2 seconds of traveling distance between you and the vehicle ahead of you. For example, imagine the vehicle ahead of you passes a tree, and at that same time, someone starts a stopwatch. At least 2 seconds should pass before your vehicle reaches the same tree. Remember, 2 seconds is the minimum. It's better to keep 3 or 4 seconds between you and the vehicle directly ahead so that you'll have even more time to react. While on the job, there are many sources of potential electrical hazards. These include power tools, power lines, and electrical circuits. Not only electricians are exposed to electrical hazards, groundspeople, maintenance people, and other workers in the vicinity of electric hazards are frequently victims of electrical injuries. Just because you are not working on electrical circuits does not mean you are safe from electrocution. This training will provide general electrical safety awareness and education. Your workplace may be equipped with various alarms, alerts, and warning systems. Your employer should explain these to you. Be sure you understand how to set off alarms, such as a fire alarm, if you discover an emergency. Also, be sure you know what all alarms, alerts, and warnings mean and what to do if they are turned on. Every year, hundreds of thousands of workers are diagnosed with musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs. MSDs are injuries or illnesses that affect the nerves, tendons, muscles, and supporting structures of the body. These injuries include sprains, strains, inflammation, degeneration, tears, pinched nerves or blood vessels, bone splintering, and stress fractures. Many of these problems develop gradually and result in chronic injuries, although sudden events such as trips or falls may also lead to an MSD. This module discusses the risk factors for MSDs present in an industrial setting and how to reduce those factors. This module will introduce you to the subject of ergonomics and musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs. Every year, thousands of workers are injured, not in sudden single incidents, but over time as a result of the physical requirements of their job. Because of poor workplace design and/or unreasonable expectations placed on them, these workers end up injured and unable to work. This module will examine what leads to this kind of injury and how the study of ergonomics can be applied to minimize or eliminate these problems.
A self-contained self-rescuer, or SCSR, is a portable device that provides a supply of breathable oxygen in emergency situations. An SCSR is a type of self-contained breathing apparatus. SCSRs can be used when the air is oxygen deficient, is IDLH and contaminated with toxic gases such as carbon monoxide, or is otherwise unsafe to breathe. An SCSR is intended to provide enough breathable oxygen to allow you to escape to safety from an emergency situation. They deliver fresh, breathable air through a tube that leads from the SCSR to a mouthpiece you place in your mouth. SCSRs can be used by only one person.
Working at elevated levels presents the danger of falling. Falls can be caused by inattentiveness, slippery surfaces, working in awkward or out-of-balance positions, or insufficient training. Falls can happen at construction sites, in healthcare facilities, industrial plants, and even at home. Every year, work-related falls result in numerous critical injuries. For the period 1999 to 2003, the U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, lists falls as the third most frequent cause of work-related fatalities. Falls accounted for 13% of all workplace fatalities, or 736 deaths for each year during that period. Fire is the heat and light energy released during a chemical reaction. There are three elements necessary to produce and sustain a fire: fuel, heat, and oxygen. The fuel is a combustible material such as wood, paper, oil, or propane. Heat causes the fuel to reach its ignition point. Once the ignition temperature is achieved, oxygen is consumed in the chemical reaction and heat and light are given off. The three elements form what is called the fire triangle. All elements of the triangle must be present for fire to occur. Removing any one of the three elements will stop the chemical reaction and eliminate the fire.